Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Cliff Kelly. Cliff is what you would call a political eschatology analyst, but he's a lot more than that. He's written extensively about the end times, and I think I'm not going to bury the lead. The lead is that Cliff writes in his book that he believes that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. So with that, uh, Cliff, welcome to One to
That
One,
that ought
and
to do it,
that
John.
ought to do it. I mean, whoa! How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, let's front load the big thing. I've written on and published, and that sounds like a boast. That's not my point. I've been doing political eschatology pretty much from the day I was converted to Christ back in October '79.
Explain what eschatology is.
Eschatology is just a layman's definition, which is the one I'm familiar with. It is the study of last things, the theology of last things, both Old and New Testament. Has to do with, for Christians in a case primarily, things that lead up to the run up to the return of Christ, the second coming.
And is eschatology a Latin word or a Greek word? And what does it literally mean?
It literally is translated as last things.
Okay.
So whether it's Latin or Hebrew or Greek, that is the consensus. That is, it is doctrines pertaining to the last things. And for Christians, of course, that means the coming of Christ. But what I'm concerned with, and what I write about more than anything else, is the run-up, the lead-up, and which is pretty much 2/3 of the book.
Okay, well then let's, before we go any farther, let me just, this is a very low budget operation, Cliff. So I'm gonna hide this so we can see the book.
My middle name is low budget, John.
So let's just take a quick look at the book here. I'm going to put that aside so we can see your name. So the book is The Sixth Seal 2, which means there was a Sixth Seal 1.
Yeah, here it is.
And the subtext is, I mean, nowadays there are long titles, and this one is The Sixth Seal 2, a pre-wrath commentary redux on the rise of Donald Trump and the decline of the American order 2017 to 2021. Correct. So you cover a lot of ground in this, and we're not going to go into the weeds, but you make no hesitation of stating up front what you believe about Trump, and right. So you were explaining how you got to this point.
Well, let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
In my master's work, to give you some background, was in political communication at California State University, and I basically did my master's work on John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. So I hearken back to that. I've always been a little bit of a political junkie. It's my father's fault. World War II Navy submariner combat veteran. He had me hanging out a 1957 Ford window when I was 12. We were Democrats back then, campaigning for Adlai Stevenson, and in 52?
That would have been 50s, early 50s.
52 against Eisenhower. Anyway, I've come up through the ranks, kind of from boots on the ground approach to communication, political communication. And so by the time I got to converting, as most of us did, to becoming a Reagan Republican in 1980, we get to Trump in the summer of 2015. I think it was June, I'm not sure. And I'm watching it because I watch everything political, like you do probably. And he's coming down the golden escalator, and my wife's in the next room. And I had not followed Trump. I hadn't given him any attention. I wasn't really excited about his television show. So he comes down. I thought it was pretty much a clown act. He came down, and and I like to think of myself as being an expert at political speech. And he started this thing. I was 3 minutes into it after he congratulated such a huge crowd for showing up. There was nothing but a handful of journalists. I think there were a dozen.
Uh-huh.
I remember one of the analysts wrote the first words out of his mouth were lies.
Mhm.
So I remember shouting to Susie in the next room. She says, "Are you watching Trump?" I said, "Yeah, honey, but there's nothing here." I think I clicked it off after about 5 minutes. I totally failed, totally missed it on the importance of this man to the political order.
When did it dawn on you that there was some there?
Well, I have a good friend. I don't know if I should mention her, Kendall Casey Unruh, who is pretty much the leader of the opposition at the Republican convention in 2016. I can't get my years right. She was leading the opposition to have a floor fight to stop his nomination.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure I can disclose many of the details, but Kendall's an awesome lady. You can look her up on Wiki. A history teacher, knew her stuff, political activist for the Republican Party. Anyway, she got, I won't give the details away because it's only Kendall. You should have her on, by the way.
Okay.
She was told in uncertain terms by some major Republican leaders, not the least of whom I will say was Reince Priebus, that if she did not stop, not good things would happen to her. I'm not going to go into the details.
Was she like personally threatened, physically threatened?
She has received so many death threats since that time. I've only got about 70, 75. Hers number in the hundreds, all from Trump. And so we're thinking of forming a cult. No,
Trump or Trump people?
Trump people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you some details later about mine, and where they came from would be a surprise to you. So that's when I think that was my first, what the heck is going on here? He's actually getting the nomination. He's going to be president. And I was still trying to process that when I saw I had been campaigning for Ted Cruz up until that point. Mm-hmm. And the second jolt and the thing that sealed the deal for me was when I watched the back of him get on that Trump plane. Mm-hmm. And I figured something massive is going on here. And all of his pretension of being a Christian and a conservative and all of this other stuff just dissolved. And it's been dissolving ever since without let up.
You and I first knew each other when I was at the Christian Broadcasting Network in the 80s, and you
Correct.
were at Regent University. Yep. And during the campaign, Pat Robertson, our former boss, endorsed Donald Trump. Yeah. And I have to say, that's when I began to part company with evangelicals.
I have a picture of Pat. It's not nice to speak of the dead, but truth is truth. I have a picture in my archive, my gallery of photos, political photos. Donald Trump is on the show, apparently, the 700 Club. This is, you can look this up and verify. Pat is literally bowing with his hands like this.
Oh my!
Before Trump. And that for me speaks 10,000 messages that what has happened, that things that have happened to the GOP, the American white church primarily. I'm a professional researcher, but I'm still flabbergasted.
Well, and Pat ran for president in '88 when you and I were in.
I was excited about it. I thought I was a very different man back then. I think we were all different people in 1988.
So, I mean, I can remember Jim Wallace, who was one of our Jim was probably one of your students.
Yeah,
and I can remember Jim saying Jim was very concerned about Pat running. He said that he's giving up his political birthright for a political pottage, I guess it was.
I'm chuckling because I was on the 700 Club once with Jim Wallace, and I was on the opposite side. And I thought, this guy's crazy. He was right about a lot of things.
So what is it that caused you? I mean, you were an ardent Pat Robertson supporter. I can't believe you still favored Ted Cruz.
Back then, not now.
Okay. I mean, Ted Cruz
let's back up. When I saw Ted Cruz get on the Trump plane,
Yeah.
Was that 2016, I guess?
Something like that.
Yeah. I said some very bad words out loud
Oh my.
about him. I have many foibles. That's one of them. But I was raised by a Navy dad. You have to remember that.
Well, and one of the things, let me just bring the book on again.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I appreciate about this, because I mean, I studied the first time I came in contact with eschatology was in the 70s in
Yeah.
the book, The Late Great Planet Earth. You're
I
probably
remember my
familiar with it.
mom gave me that book. Yeah.
And, it was the first time I read anything about end time theology. And I
Yeah.
mean, at that time, I was an ardent evangelical, and it's
Sure.
like, oh, this could very well be true.
Mhm.
And the thing I like about your book is that you're not dogmatic in the sense that you
No.
allow the possibility that you get things wrong. You
Correct.
are not presumptuous about setting dates
Nope.
or anything like that, but you are just doing your best to try to understand Revelation and some of the Old Testament prophecies.
Yeah. And
And
I appreciate that, John, because I came to this with fear and trembling when I felt prodded to write the first version of the book. I don't want to go too much into that, but I'm terribly. Let me just put a parenthetical here. When I see somebody writing or on television or on the YouTube say, "I'm a prophet" or "I'm an apostle" or "I'm Bishop so and so,"
right.
I can't flip the channel or click it off quickly enough.
Yeah.
I'm terribly aware of my limitations, but I have studied this stuff for 42 years now. And it took me that long. In the book, for example, I've been wrestling with this stuff forever and ever on the side of teaching my classes at various universities. I could never quite bring it together in a kind of a rough sequence. God created time linearly, and generally, although the Bible goes back and forth, there is a linear progression with a beginning, a middle, and an end, an eschaton, a telos,
Mhm.
that made sense to me after turning 70. After 40 years, it was as if some of the stuff was, oh, well, now that makes sense. And so at the end of the book, in the section 3 of the book, I lay out a couple of chronologies that it took me 40 years to get to that I think are pretty firm, pretty solid, and pretty self-evident without
Well,
twisting the scriptures.
well, and one of the things that you talk about is Israel,
Yeah,
and the book was written before the Hamas attack
correct,
in Israel,
correct.
and so now I'm interested to know what you think about what's going on, because
Yeah,
obviously, ever since Israel existed, people have been trying to snuff them out.
right.
So, not to mention the fact that you could argue that the Israelites dethroned, took everybody else out when
Yeah,
they
well,
when they occupied the Promised
we'll
Land.
talk about that next time.
Yeah, but here we have, Hamas definitely trying to take out Israel. But
Right.
do you believe, and maybe let me phrase the question this way. Do
All
you
right. All right.
believe I believe that Israel is overreacting in Gaza?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
my concern is, and I'd be interested to know if you feel the same way,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you feel that Israel and its overreaction, its overkill in Gaza
Yeah.
is in a sense ratcheting things up? We see it with Iran now,
Yeah.
trying to get involved.
Yeah.
Is this part of your end time theology? Is it
Yeah, it
fitting?
is. Well, okay. A general overview and then a specific addressing every question.
Okay.
The general overview, as you recall, I believe there are 5 unfulfilled wars yet left in the last time, starting with what I believe to be, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm going this weekend,
Civil
Civil
War.
War.
Yeah.
I was shocked, saddened, and delighted that it came out.
Right.
Look, a lot of people are talking about this. I travel the country 3 times a year on these so-called circuit rides. I talk to people in 36 states so far, Christians mostly, and I get the same message everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. It was just a couple of days ago, I was talking to a lady who emigrated here from Europe, and her friend, an American, Christian Republicans. And I mean, she was just furious. We just got to get rid of this blankety blank Biden, and we've got to stop the deep state, and we've got to. I hear this everywhere, from literate as well as non so literate Republican conservative Christians, and so the Civil War thing, I would be amazed if maybe not a full scale civil, but certainly violence is on its way. If Trump gets into office, as I expect him to, fully, and takes that resolute desk in control again, January 20th, 2025. I've read the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. That's where we're going, and I'm deeply concerned about that. Now,
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
If I understand it without being a political scientist, I can read. I got a PhD. I can understand. It is a nuanced plan, as far as I understand. I've read the commentaries as well, to gradually, although I wonder about if it's going to be gradual, to deconstruct our time-tested separation of powers doctrine and begin to invest it in the executive as never before. Now, that is in tandem, from my perspective, with their expectation and their hope, and I expect their prayers, that Donald Trump will be that executive with almost unlimited power. His statement to Sean Hannity, notwithstanding that he'd only be a dictator for a day.
It only takes one day. It only
takes one day. With
Right.
Project 2025 and that statement and the motivation of the man, it didn't appear that way in the book because so much has happened since the publication. But
here's the thing I don't understand.
Oh, let me get back to the Israel-Hamas thing.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So the second war of those 5 wars is what I refer to as the Psalm. In fact, I just published something on Facebook today. You can look at it and read it, just a précis on the Psalm 83 war. To me, it has all the appearances of the beginning of that war, which is a much wider, expanded war in the Middle East. And that triggers what I think is the next war, the third war, the Damascus war, where nukes very well come in, then the Ezekiel war, and then finally the last war. So I see these things in sequence, one triggering the other. Getting back to your question about whether Israel, the IDF, is overreacting, I'm shaken a bit. I'm a fierce Christian Zionist without apology, when you're not supposed to be one back 30 years ago. But I'm concerned that the ferocity and the apparent, and we don't know, we're not military, the apparent carelessness with civilian and children casualties leaves me at points aghast. Now, I used to be a fierce Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu fan. I am no longer.
Why?
And I wonder, with his political and moral challenges, if he's not trying to up the game to solidify his political position. Look, I'm hardcore at this point. All my rose-colored glasses are shattered. I think he would do anything to maintain power, as Trump will do as well. So I'm not a fan. I'm concerned that Israel is doing what they have to do on the one hand, but it's a carelessness that I've never seen Israel fight a war with before.
Here's the thing I wish you'd help me understand, and that is that, why is it that the evangelical church is so in thrall to Donald Trump? He is not a person of family values. He is not a person of honesty. And, he's the antithesis of everything that evangelicals used to stand for. So what's going on? What's happening?
I have to go doctrinal on you here.
All right.
My own conviction and the conviction of a few friends who are also writing some wonderful stuff and publishing some stuff on YouTube. I'm fully convinced now, I have no doubt, that there's a passage, I believe it's in 2 Thessalonians, when Paul writes to Thessalonica, and he warns that there would come a time when, false doctrines would explode all around the world. There would also be a time when people in the church, the Christian church, would want and campaign for and pray for and anoint and benedict, basically, a certain individual leader who Paul referred to as the Antichrist, and God would watch this for a period of time. We don't know how long, but I think it's been for the last 7-8 years. Watching the church, 83% by most polls, continuing steady. I think it's actually going to be more this November. Continuing to support this man. God says at some point, and I'm interpreting Paul here, all right? It reminds me of Saul in the Old Testament. Okay, it broke God's heart in the Old Testament when they wanted Saul. And God finally told the prophet Samuel, no, let them have what they want. I believe that's where we are. I don't think God's heart is broken right now. I sense, I discern, this is just me now, an angry God, disappointed in the church so much. You want this? I'm going to give it to you, and you'll reap all the consequences. You want this that bad, and he sends them a spirit of delusion.
Well, yeah, okay.
I've read several commentaries. You can't break out of this. If God sends you that spirit, you're done. And that's a terrifying thing.
So what is it that the evangelicals want? Power? Is that what it is?
Yeah. I think I'm going to get a little, not pedantic, a little, not grotesque, but I think I've said it in some of my articles. They want their stuff. Their stuff includes America being the lead, most powerful nation on earth. They want their material bounty that we've been taught for 40 years in the church, that if you're a good Christian, you will have this, that, and the other thing. I just penned a piece now on mega church wealth, and we've got one church here that is on a $33 million a year budget, 140 employees, 6-figure salaries for all the pastors. I've been used to go to that church off and on for 20 years. They won't even talk to me anymore. I said I'd send them a copy of the book. They won't do it. They think I'm a renegade. So I think they want money. I think they want power. I think they want status. I think they want security. That's the most frightening part. There's always been historical lessons that if a country, a nation, a people, a culture is frightened enough of circumstances, they will give up their liberties for a strong man if he can guarantee the way it used to be, which is mythological. But
okay, now devil's advocate, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
People have been talking about the end times since Jesus was around.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody thought Hitler was the Antichrist.
Yeah. And so, then they thought it was Obama. Then they thought it was,
So here's my question. I mean, it's great when
you got to be more devilish, John.
I mean, here's the thing. I would argue, or at least, some of my friends would argue that religion is really the problem. If you back away from all of this stuff about how many angels dance on the head of a pin and, all these things that, who cares? It's the religious fervor that is really behind a lot of the stuff that you're talking about.
I totally.
And so doesn't I mean, isn't the solution to just go to hell with all you guys and just love each other and not get all whipped into a frenzy about doctrine? The floor is yours, sir. Use both sides of the page if necessary.
I've got so many things I want to say. You got to slow down.
All right.
First of all, love each other. I remember I used to love the Beatles. I think they have a song, "Love is all you need."
All you need is love.
And that's what I hear in the church, coast to coast.
Well, what's wrong with that? What Jesus
said. If you love Beatles theology, there's nothing wrong with it at all.
But that's Jesus's theology.
No,
love
it's
God.
Not. That's
love
half.
God.
That's
love,
half. That's half.
Love God and love each other.
Okay, now you're getting devilish, so I'm going to get feisty.
All right.
So that's half of the canon. That's half of the biblical canon. We've taken genuine Christian compassion and love for the broken, the destitute, the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, and we've canonized that, and we've said to the other part of God, the judge, the justice of God, well, we can't bring that into the church because that would frighten people. I don't know what they would have done with Jonathan Edwards had he tried to preach sinners in the hands of they would have probably put him in prison. It's Rob Bell comes to mind, a whole lot of other folks, the hyper grace gospel. It's all love. I stopped going to my church. I'm trying not to mention its name. I stopped going to my church because I'd go back and I'm watching chaos reign outside the doors and windows of the church. And they're just don't worry, Jesus loves you. This I know because the Bible told me so. I got that on day one of my
Sure.
Christian walk.
Yeah.
So that's part of my answer is we've stripped the canon of its harder things. We've stripped the canon of suffering for Christ, walking the walk of Christ, bearing our suffering, not compromising no matter what happens to us. I'll tell you a turning point in my life. I'm getting off track, but I'm a professor, so we're allowed. My final turning point, God asked me, not vocally, but I mean, the thought came about 5 years ago. Would you be willing to die for me? I remember my answer was dead honest. I'll get back to you on that, sir. I mean, this is about 2016-ish, 15, 16. And I didn't have an answer. I'd never been confronted with it. I've been taught the American gospel that if I'm doing all the things and pushing all the dials and doing everything right, I'm going to have a great life, a quiet life, a prosperous life, a healthy life. And then the question came, and as this Trump tumult was occurring, the question came in the midst of that, and it was not insignificant that it came then. By 2017, 2 years later, after the death threat started coming to me for my writing, the question came again, are you willing to die for me if I required of you? And in a kind of a crumpled mass by 2018, I said, yes, sir. Terrifies me. I'm tearing up just saying, yeah. And I think for me, that's the pivot of a true Christian. If you're willing not just to give up, material things, are you willing to lay down your life for Jesus? That was the turning point for me. And I've never wanted to go back.
So
I'm prepared for that. Should it be required of me? Death threats make it very, very real.
What kind of death
I look
threats?
forward to it.
How are they coming? How are they coming? Is it in response to this book?
Should I give you want the details a little bit?
Yeah.
Where it started coming? I used to follow Ben Shapiro, and it was on one of his threads a year and a half ago, or no, more than that, 2 years now. Time flies when you're my age. And I happened to get in on a thread, and they were talking about Trump, how wonderful Trump was, and I inserted, foolishly, I guess, why don't you think about Trump in this way? I literally had to shut down my laptop. I stopped counting at 73. I mean, they were all Trump supporters. By the way, that's what shocked me, was that Ben's audience was so filled with Trumpers. I assumed they were all nice Jewish and Christian conservatives. All 73 that came when I shut it down were all Trump supporters, and they talked about him being, sent of God, and that I don't want to exaggerate. The sense of it was, where do you live? I will kill you, your family, and if you own a dog, I'll take that too. I got 70 of them, and I shut down. Another turning point for me, that I was dealing with something that harkened back. My mother is a Sephardic Jew, that harkens back to Germany. That we're not dealing with just political adversaries here, in my view, studied view. 205 sources in my book. If you don't like what it is, it's pretty well researched. I think we're seeing the rise of something that ugly and that violent. I'm on the fringe, not the fringe. I'm on the fringe of it, in the sense that I used to talk about myself when I got fired from Liberty University by Jerry Falwell Jr. for not supporting Trump. I was kind of the first canary in the coal mine. I didn't see it coming. Another turning point, eyes wide open.
And you'd been there a long time.
I've been there 10 years. The boast is on the Lord. I had 5-star teaching ratings for 10 years in a row. Jerry Falwell Jr. and Becky would greet me and ask me to sit with them at convocation. And, well, we're so glad you're here. And when I left to go teach remote, Jerry Falwell Jr. literally, personally asked me to come back to the campus, that they missed me. Then, after he declared in January 2016 for Trump, I continued to write some comparatively easy little things that still for Cruz against Trump. March 2016, I received a termination email from HR. No explanation at that time. I would be terminated. I would have a reduced salary for 1 year, and I was gone. When I did bang on several doors, as you can imagine, in shock.
Yeah.
What was the reason? They said something about financial exigency. They had a $1.3 billion endowment in 2016. So that didn't wash too much. Look, it was obvious to me. And other
Well,
personnel.
someone confirmed it to you, right?
Yeah, they did.
What?
So eye-opening after eye-opening after, it was just, the Lord kept shaking me and said, son, I didn't raise you up to avoid all this. But I did not want to necessarily go where he wanted me to go.
Because someone said to you that you must learn to love Trump, right?
I won't mention his name because I love him, but my dearest, closest friend who I spent years with, I could tell he was broken. He was caught in that crunch, that crush of political demand. He's a lovely man, brilliant man, a Jewish background, a Messianic believer. He was on the phone. I said, I won't say his name. Brother, what's going on there? What did I do? And I could hear his voice not wanting to say it. You have to learn to love Trump. You'll come to love him. And I said another bad word. And I said, blank, no, click.
Whoa.
I've never received from Liberty University one condolence in all that time.
Let's go way back, because one of the things you reveal in your book is that you came very close to killing yourself back in 1979.
79, yeah.
Talk about that, because I've got friends who are right at death's door making that decision. What brought you to that point, and what got you beyond?
Mostly alcohol addiction and drug use. I was a professor at University of the Pacific in 1979. I was drinking so heavily. I come from a family I have Hispanic drunks on one side. I've got Scottish drunks on the other side.
Well, at least you're consistent.
Yeah. I don't know about any DNA predisposition, but I mean, I call it my Mexican bar mitzvah. I think I was 12 or 13. And it was down in San Diego. They sat all the young men down. They brought out 4 bottles of tequila, a whole bunch of lemons, asked the ladies to leave, and we just got totally ripped. I don't remember how that ended, but I started drinking at age 12 because that's what you do. By the time I was 35, I had fallen into a relationship, a lady I was going to marry. That broke up. My health, my teeth were literally falling out. My liver was 2/3 shot on a liver scan. And I fell into, never before, never since, an absolute darkness, a depression. It felt like no air in the room. I went to my house and I closed all the windows and doors. I didn't show up at University of the Pacific for like 2 weeks. I just shut down. I turned the phone off and I planned my suicide, which was, I remember the details. I had gone to a shrink one time. He gave me a bottle of 30 milligram Dalmane pills that would kill a horse. I had a bottle of $4.99 House of Stewart Scotch. I had an RX-7 in the garage with a good stereo system. I had it all planned. I had the drugs, I had the booze, I had the car, and it was going to be a good, easy plan. And I went. I remember I hadn't slept for 3 nights. I was sober for 3 nights first time. And my mom had become a spirit-filled believer 9 months to the day almost before. And she'd been praying in the background with a group of crazy ladies I called the God Squad for my salvation. I didn't know anything about it. She kept sending me stuff, Billy Graham stuff. And I kept trashing the stuff. One book I didn't throw away was a book by Johnny Cash, Man in Black. Mm-hmm. And I read that for some crazy reason that night before I was going to kill myself on Halloween 1979. And I read it till 4 a.m. I remember the arrogance. I thought, oh, this guy's more screwed up than I am. And God could help him. He rolled Jeeps and jumped out, and I drove Volkswagens into the ocean to see if they'd float, and that didn't work. The commercials were all false. Anyway, I found my way. My sister, I was calling all kinds of people. The first time I think I ever heard God, call a pastor, call a pastor. I didn't know who or what or where. I finally got the number of Eugene Kraft, old guard Pentecostal at Assembly of God, little church, about 100 people. I walked into the office, a mess, and I won't go into the details, but I sat down. He said, "What brings you here?" Yeah, I try to intellectualize. Well, it seems to me I've read some social psych. I think this is, and I'm trying to intellectualize, and I broke. I just broke. I broke down. I didn't. This guy looked like Gene Wilder, by the way, which I thought was weird, but he had a green short sleeve shirt on with a necklace and a whale on it. I don't know what that's all about, but I felt embarrassed going in, but I forgot he was in the room. I just wept and wept, and I was suicidal. I had no hope. Nobody was coaching me. I remember out of me came my first prayer was, I don't want to be a bad man anymore. I want to be a good man. That was it. And it was a slow climb. I didn't stop drinking right away till March 1982, when another sort of encounter came, and I felt like it was time. The thought came, step over the line. It's time to step away from the booze. And opened up the Bible, flopped it open. Bad theology. Flopped it open. It opened to Daniel 1:8, and Daniel decided that he would not, what's the wording, pollute himself with the king's wine or the king's food. And I was on my way to a royal dinner then. I did it. I just let out a whoop, walked away, totally delivered from alcohol. So that was the suicide. The alcohol was the thing. Some things happened to me as a kid I won't go into that triggered that. But that was what started this slow climb back. And it's been a grinding, wonderful, terrible, painful. When a PhD has to have his entire worldview deconstructed by scripture, that's not a fun thing. That's not an easy thing. But it did. Regent. Oh, I lost the picture. Regent University, I had 5 men mentoring me. Herb Titus from law, Gary Amos from law. I can't remember them all now. Economics, science, government, history. These guys were just pouring into me for 15 years.
Was Bob Schlosser one of them?
Bob Schlosser was one of them. When I found out, just after I was appointed to head up the Public Affairs Journalism, that Bob Schlosser was going to be president, well, we almost did form a cult. It was, every time he spoke, it was a little embarrassing. Cliff Kelly over there, he's raising up journalists. I remember I went before this big crowd of supporters of this university one night in CBN. Well, Dr. Kelly, what is it you're training your journalists to do? It was so schmaltzy and it was wonderful. Yeah. I'm training them to tell the truth. The place went crazy. The lid of the building went off. But that was true. That was what we were trying.
I mean, Bob Schlosser was one of my mentors. He was a former assistant editor at the New York Times, and became president of
Region. Gem of a man, and his wife, Gloria. He was always so kind to me. He knew I was new at this particular job, and one time my biggest, fondest memory of him, and he had tears in his eyes. He knew I'd been taking a beating from some of my own faculty who didn't want to go conservative. And it was rough first 2 years. And with tears in his eyes, he came, Cliff, I want you to know what you're doing is heroic. And then I teared up. And that's the kind of man he was.
Well, I mean,
I didn't know we were going to go that direction.
Well, but I mean, I think that's important because, it's one thing to talk about what you've been working on now, but I think it's definitely important to find out how you got there. Yeah. And I want to give people an opportunity to contact you.
Sure.
And so your website also has a portal so that people can send you an email. It's the sixthsealsite.com, and it's SITE, correct?
Yeah, I wonder if it might be better, John, on reflection, if I could give my email address.
Sure, I'll tell you what.
Quicker way.
You tell me, and I'll write it up, and then we'll put it on the screen.
It's similar to this, all lowercase. Kelly, 6th Seal at gmail.com. Kelly6Seal@gmail.com. I could answer them a lot more readily with that. The website's laborious.
Let me just pop it up. Make sure it's spelled correctly. Kelly6Seal@gmail.com.
That's it.
That's your email address.
Good.
Let me just see if there's anything else I want to talk about.
I'm putting my glasses on again, John. My daughter said my IQ would go up 15 points if I wore these.
Well, and I just had cataract surgery, and now I don't need glasses, and so everybody says I can hear my wife better. One thing I want to mention: we haven't really met. Your unofficial sidekick is Scout the Wonder Dog.
Scout the Wonder
Rescue
Dog.
Rhodesian Ridgeback Mix. Is Scout there?
I don't think he's not very social.
Oh, okay.
There's my guy.
All right.
Yeah, he's a 12-year-old rescue Rhodesian Ridgeback mix, and he still thinks Ridgebacks were trained to hunt lions. He thinks he's hunting lions. This is God's truth. 3 times he's looked up in the sky and saw a Boeing 757 and started barking and jumping up at it. He wanted it.
Yeah. So anyway, the book is The Sixth Seal 2.
Yeah.
And the subheading is a pre-Wrath commentary redux on the rise of Donald Trump and the decline of the American order 2017 to 2021. And it's a very challenging read. I've got just about every page is earmarked, and I've got, all kinds of stuff. I can't say that I agree with everything.
No, that's fine.
You and I'm probably more liberal than you are, but one thing we do agree on is that, Donald Trump is not a nice man. And
I wanted to answer that question. I read several studies that listed 42 specific scriptural markers for the Antichrist. That's why I was so reluctant to cover this. He checks every box. Nobody comes close to that. So theologically, almost scientifically, it's hard for me to deny that. By the way, the original book, what I did with it, the original book was published in 2017.
Hold on. Let me put you on solo there.
Oh, you don't need to sell this. They're selling it for $70 online. It's not worth it. The world changed. I wasn't going to write another book, but between 17 and 21, we have a different America. We have a different world. We have a different church, and I'm a different man. So I felt compelled to do the update, and I'm not going to write any more books.
Okay. Well, Cliff, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
I'm John DeDakis. You've been one-to-one with me. That's my website, johndedakis.com, and you can get in touch with Cliff Kelly at Kelly6Seal@gmail.com. Our guest has been Dr. Cliff Kelly. Cliff, thank you very much.
John, God bless you. I appreciate the opportunity.